Okay, thank you everyone for joining. Now you can see why we're called Our House, because there is an unbelievable amount of good music that relates to the songs, that relates to the name. So thanks for dancing along with us as you join. I'm Ollie Whittington. I'm the initiator and co-lead alongside my amazing team for Our House. And this is Power to the People, Shaping a People's Charter, our first public event. So thank you for joining on a Friday, sunny, I hope where you are, afternoon. We're going to be having a great time this afternoon where we'll be introducing the work, what's behind the work, and where we're heading, hopefully, with all of you. And then we'll be having a conversation with Katy, Rubin, John Alexander, and Mara Livermore to talk about where we're seeing and drawing inspiration from around the world of democracy at the moment. And then for the second half, we're going to actually build a People's Charter together, the first digital People's Charter for this process, using a tool, Pol.is. And just so you don't get scared at the half-hour mark, we're going to be doing it together throughout the call. So if you're out walking around, you can still, just be listening in and voting on Pol.is. Don't jump off. We won't be separating you into rooms. You'll just be having a chance to participate with all of us in the chat and as we go through with help from digital tools. So thanks for joining again. To ground ourselves in where we're at and where we started, I'm going to be sharing about where we're seeing the moment we're in and the movement we're hoping to build alongside all of you joining today. So this started just over a year ago in the run-up to the 2024 election, where in a time of social, economic, and environmental collapse, we saw this incredibly low turnout approaching us, and ultimately twice the number of people not voting. 19 million people across the UK choosing not to vote, double the amount that voted for Labour, even though they now have a supermajority, just showing how out of touch, unrepresentative our political system is. And since, sadly, it hasn't got any better. We've seen this polling from February this year where trust in our political parties to lead change is non-existent. More than 50% across almost every issue, cost of living to crime, to unemployment, to global crises and conflicts. People were saying that either none of them or they just don't know which political party they would trust the most to lead on those issues. And it's showing this real gap of our political system to bring about the change that people want and need right now. And across all of that, things are getting harder in every place and community across the country, no matter what you care about, whether it's getting NHS waiting lines down, just fixing a pothole outside where you live, or supporting people to tackle climate change locally. Everything is getting harder and getting worse. But despite all of that, we continue to be inspired by the pockets of hope and inspiration of communities building the future we need today. They're doing that in despite of the political system that at times intentionally, sometimes unintentionally, squashes local community action. And we're seeing a really amazing work across the country, from East Marsh United, where this picture is taken from, that started with litter picking and is now building community wealth and re-greening the streets, to national movements and celebrations for democracy, such as Fate Britain and beyond. We're seeing a real weaving of ideas and communities building the future we need. So that's where we started Our House from, to build a movement for a new way of doing democracy and expressing that through a wave of people's charters across the UK. And when we say a movement, we don't mean starting from scratch and asking all of you to sign up as a part of Our House, because we know that you are organising and connected locally. You have these deep local community-rooted organisations, and we want to bring everyone together in that space to say, whatever it is that you're working on, let's change how our political system works for a new way of doing democracy, one that's values led, one that supports people to address the issues that they care about locally and create the change that we need for the challenges we face. And we're going to do that through people's charters. And that's because we know that in the UK, we have a rich history of political systems change coming through people's charters. So this is a series of commitments we can make to each other to start to build and express the democracy locally that we need, and then demands where we want the political system to change. We've just seen yesterday that votes for 16 are coming in, and that's an example of how we can actually start to shift how that political system works and open it up to more people and a better way of doing democracy. But that, of course, needs to be built by the people. If we're really practicing what we preach, we need to do this in a participatory way. And the way we're doing that is through an incredible group of people who you're going to hear from each of them across the next hour, including myself from participatory design background, Mara from deliberative democracy, Kendall from digital participation and engagement, Anira from people's assemblies, Katy from legislative theatre, and Salma from equity-led design and research. And we're also supported by an amazing group of advisors that bring together storytelling, democratic innovation in academia, alliance building, the preceding Chartist movement, Charter 88, that won the Scottish, Welsh, and Northern Irish parliaments, and of course connected to the global network of shifting power through community-led change. So across this work, we want to build and connect the people-powered movement through a wave of local people's charters across the 4 nations. We want to amplify these stories that we're seeing at a local level so that people can see and experience the change that we're talking about in their local areas and in national media. And then it's no good doing this outside of the system, not connected to where power lies today. So we want to build this in-system alliance of champions that can open the doors and bring about this political systems change for a better future for all. So with that, how are we going to do it? I'm going to pass over to my amazing colleague, Salma, to talk us through our plan.
Thank you. Sorry, bear with me a little bit. I've got a croaky throat. So we have a 3-step plan, and our first step is to gather local people's charters. So we're building people's charters for local and national political systems change, and that doesn't mean making assumptions. So we won't go in thinking that we have all the answers, and we also won't go in thinking that you have none. It's very much kind of that mutual kind of building of learning what you're already doing, and also sharing anything that we might know that might be valuable, and then doing that kind of collaboration, learning together. Our aim is to have 100 local people charters in the beginning, and we've already started some of that work with East Marsh United and also Rathlin Island in Northern Ireland. And we've been enjoying it so far. And some examples of what this might look like. So as you can see on the screen, so a charter in the north might say, for example, we want the Citizens' Assembly on Scotland's future in the Union. Another charter might say we want 20% of local government spending decided through participatory budgeting. But the idea is that each local area can have their say and kind of exercise their voice and express themselves about anything that they care about, be it values, be it local, place-based, regional, systemic, national. And then after we've gathered those local people's charters, we're then going to have an assembly of assemblies. So we're going to start developing people's charters in the 4 nations. So we'll be developing charters in England, Northern Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. And then finally, we're going to start demonstrating the democracy that we want. So what does it mean to kind of live the democracy that we want right now? What are tangible, real things that we can do right now to exercise that and to show others? And how can we then build a movement where others can join and it's accessible, and we can continue to kind of learn and develop together? And that's the plan. And I'll hand over now to my other amazing colleagues, so John Alexander, Kate Rubin, and Mara Livermore, who are going to have a little bit of an interview to understand how the future we need is already here.
Okay, everybody, thank you so much for that, Salma. And it is so nice to be inviting both John and Katy up to the virtual spotlight stage. And yeah, so my name is Mara. I'm welcoming John Alexander, who is the co founder of the New Citizen Project, a strategy and innovation consultancy, and author of Citizens: Why the Key to Fixing Everything is All of Us. And his work centers around seeing today as a civic opportunity to shift the narrative from the individual to the collective. And I learned as I was putting together that little short bio that you have 3 master's degrees, which is a lot of master's degrees to have. And I can also welcome Katy Rubin. Now, Katy is a high energy, high impact creative democracy powerhouse, a civic change practitioner working with governments, organizations, and community groups to co create policies and practices and implement and advance legislative theatre. And also, among a long list of recent and relevant credits, let me see if that's my feedback and I can help turn that down a bit. One of them I should mention is recent post as an Atlantic Fellow for Social and Economic Equity at LSE. So I am in excellent, excellent company as a creative facilitator, writer, researcher, and academic. And I am going to start with some questions. And so my first question is for you, John. And I want to know, based on your time in the game, which is quite significant, and everything that you're seeing around you and what's on your radar at the moment, co-creating civic change, is it working?
um, you've outed me as both a massive geek and very old by describing 3 master's degrees and having been doing this work for too long. So thanks for that, Mara. I love you too, mate. I guess what I would say, I kind of want to bring in a couple of examples from, or one example from across the world, and sort of maybe mention a little bit more the Charter 88 and the roots of this kind of idea of Chartism, because I think what I'm really drawing from the research I've been doing and the things I've been looking at is that there is a real need not to just ask the existing systems to create the change that is needed, but we're going to have to articulate and create the space for them to move into. And I think that's where I'm getting to, and that's why I'm involved in as advisor to our house. And what and just to say another little word about what I mean by that, I don't think this is a moment really for attacking and activism and kind of campaigning and protest, because I don't think that they can even see what's needed really, except the being offered. The way I've been talking to folks about this is like the problems that we have with our political systems, and I think this is global really, are not at the level. Is a metaphor I've been using. It's not just that we need slightly better players on the pitch, or even that we need to pick a different team to support. It's actually the rules of the game aren't fit for purpose. And so at that level, we need to be articulating what the rule changes need to be, and then asking for those and starting to live them ourselves, which I really love about the way Selma was just putting it. Just to give you like one example internationally, and then mention Chartism in a bit more detail, like the story that I always go back to in all of my work at the moment is the transformation of Taiwanese democracy over the last decade or so. And where this started was with a hacker movement called GovZero, who basically created parallel websites to government websites, all with URLs that ended g0v.tw. And they basically imagined how a different democracy could work, but made it visible to people. And then when there was a big kind of breakdown moment in Taiwanese politics, essentially those people were invited, and those practices were invited into to be part of it. And the leaders of that Taiwanese movement don't talk about protesting and campaigning, and they talk about like demonstrating. They talk about showing how the system could work, and being ready when things are obviously broken, to have their approaches stepped into. and that led, many of you have heard me riff about this before, like that led to a place where when COVID hit, Taiwan's response was different to anything anywhere in the world. They effectively crowdsourced their national response, and it was arguably the most successful anywhere in the world. So to your question, it is possible, but I think it requires something different of us. Like good co-creative work requires people to step into a place of building the rules we need, not just asking the existing systems and power structures to evolve. And that is where I think Chartism, and the British history in particular of Chartism, that originally a worker movement in the 1840s that defined 6 demands for how the rules of politics should change, and as a result of building a coherent sort of mass energy behind those demands, achieved 5 of the 6 of them within 50 years or something, and the last one was a terrible idea. So so they threw that one out, and that's cool. But and then which the amazing Anthony Barnett, who I'm so glad to see you've got as an advisor to this, led that work. That was another iteration of that, kind of articulating a set of proposals and not attaching them to one political party or whatever, not just sticking to one small thing, but really articulating a big set of ideas, and then building the kind of momentum for that across the political spectrum, knowing that the hunger for better rules was there across that spectrum. And that's why I'm so excited to see this. I think the energy of like building that locally and building the demands with people is another step on from what Charter 88 did. Actually building it with people and then demanding it with people is super exciting. So sorry, I've probably like totally paged across your question, but that's why I'm excited about, and that's why I'm here. Yay.
No, that's perfect, and your energy and excitement for it is infectious. And yeah, thank you, because that is a very comprehensive answer. I'm going to go over to Katy next. Hey, Katy.
Hi. All right. Should I just jump in? Thanks, Mara, and thanks, John. It's so exciting to think about I'm thinking right now about where we're seeing successes, listening to John and thinking about what is this moment, right? And for me, so I'm a legislative theater practitioner, as Mara said, and I see lots of the folks that we know here working in the democracy space who are all kind of doing amazing, really incredible, successful things around climate democracy and all kinds of, local government reform and all these kinds of projects, right? And I'm working usually like with councils, with communities where we're working on an issue. So for example, people are coming up with policies for change for the world they want to see around housing, around homelessness, around climate change in places like Glasgow, Belfast, Medway, Manchester, Birmingham. And I can talk a little bit about these things, but I have 2 kind of questions about what is working and what isn't working, and what's this moment right now. I think there's such a moment for an explosion of participatory democracy, from legislative theater to participatory budgeting to citizens assemblies to different kinds of people's assemblies, digital democracy, where both governments or institutions and communities say, wait a minute, the way we're making decisions isn't working. Some policy is broken, or some practice is broken, some budget is broken, some design is broken. It's not working for people. It's not ethical, it's not effective, we're not distributing resources well, and we're doing a lot of these processes issue by issue, area by area, right? So Glasgow is working on their transport strategy with disabled young people, saying, how do we green Glasgow in a way that makes it accessible for everybody? Or Birmingham's working on youth employment opportunities with young people from across the West Midlands. How do we make sure every young person can get the advice and experience and job opportunities they need? And that's amazing. But we're seeing a lot of outcomes from those processes. I'm really excited about it. But I'm also seeing barriers there. And what I'm seeing is that, as John was saying, sometimes those projects that I'm working on, we're sort of waiting for the existing systems to invite us in, to fund it, to allow it to happen, and I think and then there's these kind of boxes of issues or areas or communities that we're allowed to work in. And I think this is a time where we don't have the time anymore. We don't have the patience right? Because things are really getting bad for our democracy, for our planet, for our communities. And so the question for me is, how can we bring together all those incredible tools we have, but really say from the bottom up, from the grassroots up, we know how to make change differently. We have been doing it, right? From school bike trains, that's what's on my mind right now, because my kids have started a bike train at our school and it's going wild. There's 200 kids riding in the street every day. It was on BBC this morning, and it's awesome. And the kids are now going, this is what we need in our neighborhood, in our school. That's an expression of hyperlocal democracy. And I think we can do that from the bottom up, from local areas to national areas, and say not just one issue, not just one community, but we now know that we have the creativity, the imagination, the joyful energy, the activation to totally reimagine and recreate our entire system of politics, our entire democracy. And we can't wait, right? As John said, as Ali said, we can't wait for the existing systems to make some space for us, although I think this is really important. If we are all citizens, if we're all actors, as we say in legislative theater, because we all take action, if we're all policymakers, then that includes our politicians. They're also citizens. They're also our neighbors. They're also creative. So we want to invite them into these processes, to these charters, to this movement building, but not wait for them to open up the door, right? What if we could work alongside as neighbors, which might transform the entire relationship we have with electeds and politicians and bureaucrats, which is exactly what we're trying to do here. So I guess just to wrap that up, I think there's all these incredible issue by issue, locality by locality examples that all of us are doing, and I'm so excited by them. And I want us to say, we now know how much power we have. We can catapult from there into something much more ambitious.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for sharing all of these examples of democracy and participation and how it's working really wonderfully where you see it. And I just want to go back and touch on and get a little bit more color from you for about like 2 minutes or so on the fact that even when you're steeped in it and from within it, like sometimes you're sitting at home sending emails, sometimes you're sitting at home sending invoices, sometimes you're sitting at home like waiting for people to respond, and like that dance between invitation and like elbowing your way in is, you know, it is big. It requires consistent energy, etc. So I guess like what do you see, or what are your hopes for the joining of that up? And I guess more than that, what do you do on those days where it feels like things might be getting lost, or things might be getting siloed? How do you bring things together, and what are the things that you're passionate about in that area?
Sure. So I mean, we've mentioned already, right? Salma mentioned we've been starting these people's charters along with and together with communities in Grimsby, in Rathlin Island. And what's happening there is that there's tons of organizing infrastructure about building new systems and visioning what places want. And there's the excitement that they're feeling when we're working together is, what if this could be something happening everywhere? What if we could be part of a national movement of people's charters, right? Or across the 4 nations, movement of people's charters. So it's not necessarily that anyone is doing anything differently, but we know we're building power in the sense that we're doing it together. And by doing it together and escalating up and taking those demands to the national level, it is different. And so I guess I'm energized by actually saying we don't need to invent anything new, right? We can take the bike train and go, okay, what do schools want? What do kids want across the UK, and how do they want to be a part of democracy? Great. We've got 16-year-olds voting. Why not 11-year-olds, right? Let's go on from there. In New York City, participatory budgeting, 11-year-olds and any undocumented immigrants vote in participatory budgeting across New York City. That can happen bigger than just participatory budgeting. So those things are happening all over the world. And the opportunity now is to get on that roller coaster. And so when I'm feeling down, I really just feel like I want to look at what anyone else is doing. And the opportunity with our house is to be in those rooms together and kind of build our collective energy, buoyed by what everybody else is doing. So that is the best opportunity.
I don't think Katy does feeling down, really. Just chip in and underline a couple of quick things. The first, I think this thing about this is not and I sort of hinted at it, but I really want to underline it. This is not an anti-politician or an anti-politics movement. It's a movement that's about creating the space for politics to move into. And I think the underlying diagnosis is really that what we have right now isn't working for anyone, right? Like all of us, almost all of us are kind of left out right now. And this language of left behind, I think, is terrible. Frankly, I think it's deeply unhelpful because it says that some are ahead and some are behind. And actually, it's almost all of us are left out. And those who are left in, the politicians and civil servants in positions where there is some degree of meaningful, like they're under unsustainable pressure too. And so this isn't about attacking anyone, actually. I think this is about going, actually, we all know we're at some degree of breaking point. There are these tools and processes that are available that are tried and tested, proven around the world. And if we can cohere that power, we genuinely can create the space for something to move into if we start from a point of view that says everyone has a contribution to make to this. And so if I'm looking at the world, I actually, like, it's a really dark and difficult time, right? Like, we know this, we all know that. But staring at that and trying to define everything we do in response to that means that all you do is pay attention to the darkness, and what you pay attention to grows. What this work is about is saying, what if we pay attention to the things that are possible, to the things that we want, and if we give our attention to that, then that is what will grow. And so I just like want to end. I know you want to get into actually doing the work, and I just want to end with that and just say, like, this is the stuff, folks. Like, we still have time, we still have agency, and this is an amazing way to cohere that into something that can make a meaningful political difference. And so, good on you all for being in this call. Good on you guys as a team for leading it. I am here as cheerleader in whatever capacity I can be, and go.
That's great. Thank you so much. And you actually hopped in on what the next question I was going to put to you was, which was about the kind of energy that I get and see. And I can see in the chat as well, so many people dropping in, also awesome other projects and work, etc. And it's so easy after like even 20 minutes of this for my energy levels to be buoyed. But even me, as someone who works in this space all the time, I hear the word democracy and I can be like, oh gosh, that again. And it's like, yeah, so what you talked about there and that difference between, or like bringing people along from this system that isn't working for anyone really, is so important. And yeah, the heart of everyone's work. So thank you everybody for sitting in and joining us in that bit of the conversation. Please do keep it going in the chat. We are monitoring all your questions, and yeah, I think it's time to hand over now, bang on, to Nera. So thank you both, John and Katy, for having that chat with me.
Hi everyone. Yeah, that was so inspiring and interesting. My name's Naira, and yeah, I also work in participatory democracy. And I'm going to take us back to our house and thinking about, yeah, a bit more about what our house is trying to do and why we are focusing on building a people's charter. So we're going to travel back 200 years to Manchester. So it's 1839. Industrialization is changing the country. The air is thick with soot. Rent's going up. Bread's doubled in price. Wages are going down. People can't afford to heat their homes. They're hungry. They're angry. They're disillusioned. Does it sound familiar? People in 1839, they want change. Like, things have been getting worse for decades. But despite this context and having no influence and no voice, they still have hope, and this hope that something can be different. And among them is a man we're going to talk to you a bit about called William Cuffy. And his father was formerly an enslaved black man from the Caribbean, and his mum was a white English woman, and he was a tailor. And he'd worked since he was a boy, like long hours, low pay. He'd watch richer people get richer and people like him get poorer. And he's heard politicians talk about progress while there are kids working in mines and food prices rising and people not having a say in their lives. And when it's a time when the only people who can vote are politicians. The only people who can vote are landowners, and who could be politicians were like wealthy aristocrats. And he knows what that means. It means that the system isn't broken. It's working exactly as it's been designed for the few, not the many. So William becomes part of this growing workers' movement, the Chartists, and they're not fighting for higher wages or better working conditions because they see those as symptoms. They're fighting the root cause, which is power, who has it and how it works. So this group of workers get together and they write the People's Charter, which, as John said, has 6 demands. And they were really radical at the time. So votes for all men, women weren't included, secret ballots, fair elections, and pay for MPs so that ordinary people can run for office, not just wealthy aristocrats and landowners. And these demands spread like wildfire. And it's the first mass movement for democracy in the country. And over the years, not immediately, all of these demands that they're asking for become law, and they change the way that the country works for the better. But things need change again. We're here in 2025 and we're facing similar problems to the problems people were facing 200 years ago. We've got billionaires growing richer while working people skip meals or have to go to food banks. Rent is rising, wages are flat and basically going down. Public services are crumbling. And like in Coffee's time, we're told that's just the way it is. But the inspiring and incredible thing about the Chartists is they didn't just accept what they were told. They knew that to make society fairer, they didn't just campaign for better wages or cheaper rent, that they had to like work together to build and demand real power. And they're starting from a similar place, like where we don't have a say in how our lives work and we need to reimagine the system. And that is what our challenge is. And that is fundamentally what our house is about. It's about kind of imagining a new way of doing democracy and working together to bring that into being. So yeah, a bit about that context. We want to invite you to kind of use your imaginations a bit now and think about what a future would look like that works for everyone, where power isn't just in the hands of a few and where we all have a say. And we need to think big and dream. And then once we start imagining and thinking about that world, we can bring it into being, just like William Cuffy and the Chartists did as well. So I'm going to invite you to close your eyes if you want and step into a future 10 years away. So imagine it's 2035 and things are looking different. We've moved away from divisive politics, from political opportunists seeking deals for them and their friends. Like, power shared, we collaborate, we listen, we care, we work together to decide what's best for all of us. So just have a think, what does this world look like in practice? What does it look like to walk down the street? What are the public spaces like? How's the typical day structured? What do we do for work? Housing, what's our housing like? What do we do for food? What are the relationships between people and communities like? And what are the shared beliefs that we have? What are the unspoken ways of being together that everyone believes in and respects? And this is your imagination, to just go big, be like, this ideal people-powered, people-centered future, 2035, and with the planet as well, and the rest of nature. Okay, so hopefully you've imagined a bit about what this might look like. And we just want to invite you really to think about what might the values be that underpin this people-centered and kind of people-powered democracy and this way of living together. Like, what values come to mind? What about this? And this is about kind of our ways of being, the things that are important, how we interact. So I want you to, yeah, have a think. What values can shape the future that we want and need, and one that considers the well-being of all? And I'm going to pass over to Ollie to take that into the next step.
Thanks, Naira, and thanks for guiding us through that. So hopefully you have a bit of a grounding in why we're following in these footsteps of this story of Chartism and building a new People's Charter. And you've started to see and imagine that world that we could reach together if we work together and collaborate to build people power. So now we're going to start to share these values, and thanks for sharing some of them already. But Kendall will just share in the chat now a tool that we're going to use to help to collect the values that you think are important to us. We're using a tool called Pol.is, which is an open source digital democracy tool. So it's been designed to find areas of consensus where people agree with each other on some things that we think are these underpinning values that come across all of our, that should be across the way that democracy works in the future. So there are some values that are already populated on there that you'll see. And then when you've voted on those, so you can either agree on the value that comes up or disagree. Once you've voted on those and you've worked through the ones that have come out of other processes that we've led, then I'd invite you to add your own as well, so that we start to build and find these areas of consensus. And as any democracy, we might not all agree in different policies or proposals or how the country should work, but we need to find these underlying values that we think should be at the core of democracy across the 4 nations of the UK. So hopefully you're seeing that, and Kendall, maybe worth sharing again, just so that we start to pin that Pol.is instance. So you'll have some values coming up, and there's some I'm already seeing people adding more, which is great to see as well. So yeah, please vote and add the ones that come to mind for you. And as we get into that, I'm going to share now how we start to build a People's Charter, because you're starting to see a core element of it. And let me share my screen again. Great. So the core thing to share with this is that we're not building democracy for democracy's sake. Democracy has to bring some values to life that we all agree on should be a core part of the values of people living in the 4 nations of the UK. And then we have to come up with ways in which to bring these values to life, the tools that we can use to build the democracy we need for the future. So I'm going to introduce how that works in practice and share some of the learnings from the work we've done with partners, some of which are on the call, which is amazing to see, and thank you for joining us. So yeah, first thing to say is there's not one set way, and I saw in one of the questions asking, how much can we shape this? And it's totally led at that local level for the way that works for you. The communities that you have your relationships with best, and you'll know what will work in terms of getting people engaged, getting people excited about a new way of doing democracy. And a big part of that is whether we want to do something that's slow and patient and with care, or whether we want to just jump in and do something fast, fun, and messy and just get into it. So to say that there are kind of 2 core approaches to it. You can have months on either side of how you work with building questions around what does democracy mean to you? What would a people-powered future look like to you? And why are we doing this work in building a People's Charter and laying the groundwork? And we're doing that in partnership at the moment with East Marsh United in Grimsby, and having some of those early community conversations, because this is a lot of new stuff for most of us. We don't talk and think about democracy every day at the moment. And then we've developed a game with our amazing team and the game designer Matteo Menapace, who's helped us build this really fun, silly game where you get to see and experience the different types of participatory democracy that are available to us, different ways of doing democracy, because we know these ideas aren't common knowledge outside of maybe this room, and maybe not even common knowledge across all of us here. So it's about an opportunity to open up that toolkit and give people a chance to see what's possible. And then we have remaining time to test, rewrite, celebrate, experiment, bring it to life. Can we start to practice some of the tools that we've seen and we've said are important to show how they work in practice? So yeah, the core part of this can be a really quick and fun 90-minute game that you can play with people from a starting place of never heard of participatory democracy, not interested in politics today or democracy, to ending point of holding some of these new concepts and old concepts around different ways of doing democracy. And I'm just going to share some of these because we've been saying some of the words, but I'll share what they actually mean in practice for just 3 examples. So the first is legislative theatre, and that is a practice that Katy and our team brings to life around the UK and the world. It's bringing people who have experience of the challenge that we're trying to address together to create and perform original plays based on their experiences, and acting that out for people to see firsthand how they experience the world today and some of the challenges they face. We then bring together audience members, so the public and policymakers, to improvise alternatives and bring proposed policy and test these policy ideas to life in practice together, doing it in real time so that we can see how it works and think about how we can make these ideas better. There's also citizens' assemblies, which are probably the most famous of the participatory democracy tools at the moment, and they are spreading all around the world at the local, regional and national levels. And they rely on a randomized and representative group of people selected through a process that's called sortition, which aims to build a mini version of the public of that area that you're in. So it might be at the city, so whatever the general population looks like in that city, bringing around 100 people together that are representative of that wider city, or even at the national levels. And they are hosted in these assemblies where people have time and space. They're paid money for their time to be there, to hear balanced perspectives, hear evidence from a range of experts on topics, not just one side of the argument, but the full breadth of arguments possible around that challenge, so that people can take and make considered judgment on those elements. And finally, just to share one last tool, even though we have a list way longer than this, is participatory budgeting. It's another participatory democracy tool that's growing in popularity, and it's used, but it's open to anyone to come up with ideas for a public issue and generate ideas for public voting on those ideas to distribute money around. And again, it's an idea that is happening at both local city levels and regional and national levels. And across all of this, people get to play this game. They get to see who has power in these tools and how does it work together, to start to imagine and build and debate and act out these new types of democracy that we want to see. And we've had the pleasure of developing this across the UK with some amazing groups of people. So we've been on Rathlin Island in Northern Ireland with the incredible group at the RDCA, and with Brian Morgan, who's leading a citizen panel on Rathlin Island. We've been working with East Marsh United, we've mentioned a few times, in Grimsby. We've built a student charter at a sixth form in London, and we've run these kind of quick play activities at festivals at Not Westminster and Be the Earth. And I'm just going to share back some of the demands that have come out of these activities at various stages along the process, so that you get an idea of what we're talking about when we're saying we're building demands for political systems change. So these are, again, not the finished product, but some of the early demands that are rising from these activities. So in East Marsh United, the tool and the demand that came out of this is equal access to power. So not just equal access to voting and universal suffrage, but equal access to power, so that there's local and national citizens' assemblies that can drive the change and have power to make that change. At the student charter, it became really important that people who are impacted have the right to participate, so that we change our rights. We're not just consulted on, but we have the right to participate and shape the the outcomes of those decisions. And we might draw on different participatory democracy tools to get there, but the core change is we want to change our right to accessing that decision-making space. At Be the Earth, there was the importance of nature came up through this process as well. So nature having a voice in participatory processes and political rights. On Rathlin Island, we heard over and over again, no decisions about us without us, talking about the need for real devolution of power down to the local level so that local people can shape those decisions and shape their local areas together. And at Not Westminster, one of the demands that came out was for a neighbourhood wealth fund that was decided by and for the community. So bringing together some of these areas around new pots of money than wealth funds that are coming at the moment, but bringing in this element of participatory budgeting and decision making so that they're not just local wealth funds, but they're wealth funds that are owned and acted and decided on by the people. So those are some ideas. They might be totally new to you, or there might be something that you're working on yourself. And we get that this has been only 50 minutes nearly of time together, and there's probably lots of ideas, and it might be overwhelming, it might be exciting, it might be a combination of the two. But we want to do something together in real time, and we want to shape our People's Charter. So I'm going to just check in with Kendall if we've had any emerging results from our values work.
So I think we may have overwhelmed Pol.is a little bit. Really, I don't know if Pol.is has seen so many people voting on so many new statements so quickly. The whole idea with the values is we want to see where the consensus lies in terms of things that we consider really important underpinning a future democracy. We had some really cool new ones added. Some of them that I really loved were a shared sense of purpose, integrity, forgiveness. I thought that one was great. Creativity, joy, dignity. And the whole point of this is that it doesn't make sense to think about policy or things we want to enact without thinking about what the undergirding is, what the girding is for those policies. So I think it's now time to introduce our Digital People's Charter. So,
Exciting.
Yeah, very exciting. Pol.is also, I saw that there was maybe a little bit of confusion about how it works. What's really cool about it is it's open source and it provides data science that otherwise we probably wouldn't have access to. So we'll be sharing with you at one point a report that kind of shows a lot of where consensus lies on a lot of these statements. The whole idea is that you vote on these statements that already exist. They're showed to everybody in completely different order. You choose to agree, to disagree, or if you really have no opinion, you can do pass or unsure. You can also add in your email, so you'll receive updates when new statements are available to vote on. And then below, you add your own statements. It seems like a lot of people had this, but just for future reference. So from our values, we'll start building our demands. We've already put in those ones that Ollie has shown us that came from East Marsh and from Rathlin Island. And we're hoping that we can create our own ones here as well. This is going to be open to everyone. Maybe it's at the moment, obviously we're all here because we share maybe a common sense of what the future could look like. So maybe it feels like a little bit of an echo chamber. I know a lot of people said that it's hard to vote no on any of these. But the idea is when we kind of open it up fully, we can kind of maybe see some other opinions of people who maybe have slightly different political leanings as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Kendall.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is the time we get to share our new digital charter, which we'll have, which is up on our website at the moment, and we'll be sharing more widely. So I just want to pause there while you can, well, hopefully that gets shared in the chat. Yeah, thanks, Kendall. And you can vote on some of the ideas that have come up through those demands already, and you can also add your own that have come through any of the conversation over the last hour or so. And I just want to pause for some questions, which we don't have heaps of time for. But yeah, I just want to get to a couple maybe that are worth covering. And all of them are worth covering. And and we'll come back to them and make sure we answer for everyone if we don't get a chance to get to them. So yeah, Kendall, are you okay to kind of surface the ones that have come out on top?
Yeah, definitely. I know our first one, I think you answered, Ollie, was how are we funded? Which there you funded up, you followed up with some of the organizations and foundations that have funded us, but there was one about who is Coral? What is Coral? That one should be easy to answer, maybe.
Yeah, Coral's foundation that's led by Brian Eno, and we're very lucky to get that support and of course a wider connection to the cultural music art scene that we think is super important to any of this work. We need to make it inviting and fun. So yeah, we're connected to that world and supported by Coral.
Beautiful. The next one I thought was really interesting was what will be done with the outputs from the assemblies in each of the 4 nations. Will they be mainly used for advocacy/campaigning or demonstrating the democracy we want? How far do we see these recommendations, this vision being fed into decision making?
Yeah, great question. And if any of the team wants to jump in at any point, please do. I'll start us off with the demonstrating is really on 2 sides. So there's demonstrating in terms of showing what's possible and acting out the democracy that we want tomorrow. There's values that we say we need to start living by. Let's start working towards that, and let's also start building some of these processes on assemblies or legislative theatre or participatory design and community organising. Let's start making that real, so that this is static document that we've created and we said wants to happen, but we're making happen anyway and building across the UK. But then, of course, there will be demands, so that we will be using it as a tool for advocacy, connecting with other campaigners that exist in the democracy campaigning group, thinking about where are the places where we're already pushing and championing that for, and of course connected to amazing MPs and local, civil society and political leaders that want to see this change as well, so that there can be a connection between all these areas of work.
I can jump in for a second just to add that, in the idea is kind of demonstrating, so putting them into practice, which might mean like slapping them up on the wall in those localities and making decisions as a community using those processes already. But it also, part of this process is about a narrative thread where people all over the UK can get that energy from other communities building local people's charters. So you might see on TV from very, very far away that some other community is building a local or has built a people's charter and is funneling those demands up to the national or the charter of that devolved nation. And then that is motivating us so that we see there is a demand for a new political system across the entire UK. I think we see success looking in 2 ways. One is that we've got incredible, inspiring, activating, and concrete people's charters from the local level and upwards, but also that we've built a demand. We've built a sense of imagination that something new is possible, and we're all ready now as a movement to say, we will not keep waiting for the next election to sit home and not vote in the same system, that we are now prepared and we know we can build our own political and democratic system. So if we have created that narrative through both the newspapers and the TVs and the action that we're doing in our local areas, that is the place we need to be. That's the vision that we have.
Beautiful. I thought kind of an interesting follow-up too to that question, which is something that I think I'm throwing it in the chat, was will there be opportunities for citizens to help define not just the charters themselves, but also like how the forms they take and how they're communicated and shared, which I think is an important part of the dissemination, obviously, of once agreements are found.
Absolutely, yeah. This is a participatory movement, and we don't think that, even if all over 100 of us that have been on this call today were in charge, that would be enough. We need everyone, thousands, if not millions of people across the country shaping how this works, but also advocating for the work and sharing it in the way that feels true to them and you. we, this will be happening in conversations in the pub. It'll be happening in conversations at the sports club. It'll be at the dance class. Whatever it is that you do on your evenings and weekends, you'll be there and you'll be able to share it and thinking about the messages and the stories that you want to share that we'll aim to amplify through the work as well. Do we have maybe time for one last quick one?
Yeah, they're all like really beautifully framed, but pretty in depth. This one I thought was interesting was, how do citizens' assemblies decide what representative means? Is it outward traits such as ethnicity, economic situation, professional situation, personality traits such as introvert, extrovert? Who gets to decide the categories, which I think may actually be a very broad question. We're getting really into, semantics here. But I think that, Mara, please.
Yeah, shall I hop in on that?
Yeah.
So I'm going to try.
If it's okay.
I'm going to try in 30 seconds to address the fact that, I think most people approach it on a jury by jury, case by case process, and there are a number of different tools and ways that people decide this, from pure random sampling to kind of tweaked random sampling. Best practices to make sure that there are no lonely voices in the room, and then there's a lot of movement towards kind of weighted buckets depending on how people are affected by it and stuff. So it does depend on it's usually a conversation between the commissioner, the organizing facilitators, or people like me who say that who kind of push back maybe on some more formal things, and then quite a few heads come together to decide it on a case by case decision. But I'm always open to talking more about that.
And
awesome. Thank you, Mara.
Just to say, that's why we're looking at lots and lots of processes together, so that we can fill in the gaps that just one participatory process maybe doesn't. Just like one political system that we have now isn't answering things for everyone. One participatory democracy process isn't enough. We want all of them together to create the world that we need. Absolutely.
So I just want to acknowledge as well that it's great also to see some disagreement in the chat, because that's democracy. And I'm glad we're not just one echo chamber here, but the real core of this is building the work locally and finding these ways over polarization to come together and to build this change. And so this is the invite to you now. We really need your help really need to partner with you to make this work. So the first call to action is to get involved and build a charter with your community, one that you believe is representative of the group of people that you work with and you're connected to. They might not all be aligned, and that's okay. That's democracy. We're going to work through this together because it's a big problem to unpick. We also want any extra support that you can offer around our regional work and building out these processes locally, connecting to community groups that maybe aren't always engaged in this kind of work, and those that are, bringing it all together so that we can shape a wide movement for political systems change. Sign up to the newsletter. That's a super easy one, and you'll get the links to all of this in the chat below. And share. It's going to take hundreds, thousands, millions of us to make this change together, and through lots of different connected initiatives. So let's do the work of coming together and build this all together. And just to say again, thank you for joining us on this Friday afternoon. There's links in the chat for forms that you can fill in to get involved. There's links in the chat to join the newsletter. And we really appreciate your time, energy, love, care, concerns, everything that you have. It's gonna, take us all together. So thank you.